Welcome back to OpenLine, talking about issues surrounding the Tennessee Department of Corrections. Some great reporting by Dave Boucher with the Tennessean on a multitude of issues surrounding the Department of Correction. And with all of these, and we're going to go to calls right after this, but with all of these concerns that are out there, Phil Williams did a story tonight on our air about move toward privatization, statewide move toward privatization. Has there been talk about so many problems with the Department of Correction, let's turn more of it over to CCA, private entity? What about that?
Sure, there's been a fear among some. I won't say a very pervasive fear, but it's certainly a concern that's been raised that private prison entity, Correction Corporation of America, here based in Nashville, could take over the entire department if state lawmakers or others believe that it's not able to be saved, and that they could save money from operating it from this private entity. There are already 3 private prisons here in the state. They're working on building a large one in Trousdale County and an additional one. However, I recently spoke with, I guess now former Chief of Staff Mark Cate to the governor. He promised that the state is not heading in that direction. It's not something that they are looking to do, at least at this point. That's not to say that certain aspects of prison, of what goes on in the prison, aren't going to be private. There are already private companies providing the food, for example, in prison. And they've talked about, at today's hearing, they talked about certain aspects of facilities management that could be privatized. Now, one of the officers or state officials who's looking at privatization noted that some departments, like the Department of Correction, might opt out of some of the privatization. They acknowledge that inmates mowing the lawn will probably be cheaper than bringing in somebody else, that you would have to pay more than cents on the dollar to do that. But no, overall, at least under the previous Chief of Staff, the administration has said, no, we're not looking to privatize the entire system, while acknowledging that, they do have private prisons that they believe work. Right.
Okay, let's go to some phone calls here. Let's go to Angela. Hello, Angela?
Yes.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Well, I have a question. With the extensive types of injuries and the number of injuries, and the privatization question, the medical and mental health has gone private. What kind of independent investigation was done?
You're talking about the death of the inmate, Elbert, in West Tennessee. So, okay, what about that?
Yeah, so the extent of the investigation is kind of the crux of the issue in this story. The Department of Correction has its own internal affairs investigators, and they did investigate this death, according both to the department and officials within the prison. However, I've sources, and I've heard, in addition to the former warden, who was the warden at the time, that say that essentially the people investigating this case complained that they were spread too thin, that they were asked to do too many jobs, and that they've determined that this is a natural death, and that's because of these health records, and that there's, I think I heard from one source who said that the investigator in this case told employees who were a little bit confused at this classification that it was a natural death, that they'd been watching too much CSI. And so that clearly rubbed people the wrong way. On the flip side, the administration and the department have noted that the local prosecutor for Lauderdale County has recently reviewed the case and has also decided that he doesn't believe that there needs to be additional investigation. However, there's also a point of contention here. The department and the administration say that they referred this case to this prosecutor in 2013. However, the prosecutor told me that he hadn't reviewed this case until I sent it to him. And so there's clearly something that's different there. Now, the prosecutor still says that the case is not listed as a homicide, so therefore he doesn't think they need to do an investigation. However, it's not listed in both the coroner's report and the medical examiner's report as a natural death. It's listed, as you noted, as an unusual or suspicious death, or they couldn't determine the manner of death. And so that's his determination appears to be relying on both the department's investigation saying that it's a natural death, and the fact that instead of checking the box on this medical examiner's report that says homicide, they check the box that either says suspicious or cause not known.
And to delve a little further into that, this inmate had broken ribs. He died of blunt force trauma. I mean, tell us again, I mean, there's some debate about whether it's of natural causes or whether it's suspicious. What were the injuries?
Sure. So specifically list what the medical examiner said the cause of death was. They listed the cause of death as multiple blunt traumatic and thermal injuries. That includes at least 39 linear abrasions and scars on the front of his body, with 27 more on his back, significant burn marks around the, I guess, lower region of his body that were at some points third-degree burns. As you noted, broken ribs. We had a medical examiner, a completely different medical examiner from New Jersey, who's brought in as an expert witness, also look at these injuries. And his quote when looking at the autopsy was, "The manner of death is, probably homicide, looking at all of these problems." And so whereas, this is worth noting, the department has, while denying, obviously, that this is worth investigating, they've said that maybe you could get these injuries from falling out of bed. And so they've seemed to imply that the inmate in this case, whose name is Albert Thornton, spilled hot water on himself in the days preceding his death, and they implied that there had been something to the effect of seizures or something else that might have led him to fall out of bed. This outside medical expert said that that's just not very likely or plausible to be the cause of these injuries.
And they've also said they can't talk about it because they can't release medical information.
And so that's another point of contention. The family is currently in a lawsuit, originally in federal court, now in a kind of a regulatory court with the state, seeking damages for wrongful death. And the state has told me, at least, that they can't release this inmate's medical records to the family, which seems to be a direct violation of HIPAA. HIPAA is a federal healthcare law that state entities and many other entities tend to cite as a reason not to release information. But at least in this case, it appears as though if anyone is entitled to the medical records, it's certainly his family, his next of kin, and they're arguing that they just can't do that.
The Department of Correction, they can characterize deaths, is it in three ways? Suicide, natural, or homicide?
And there are a couple more, but those are some of the ways. They can say that the deaths are natural, accidental, suicide, homicide, or undetermined. In this case, they determined that this was a natural death.
And that's what might be hardest for people to understand, that somebody with the injuries this person had would be deemed a natural death. And I guess that's the focus of your questioning here.
Sure, and not only was that hard for maybe the average listener or the average reader or me, who I'm certainly not a medical expert, to understand, it was hard for the medical examiner who reviewed this inmate's body. It was hard for the initial responders. It was hard for the doctor who pronounced him dead. It was hard for this outside medical forensic expert to deem any of this as a natural death.
So is there an alternate theory? If it were homicide, is the thought that it's another inmate? Is the thought that it's somebody else? I mean, is there an alternate theory, or that's...
I've heard several alternate theories, none of which that I can prove at this point. There are, at the very least, though, I think that the takeaway from this, at least my takeaway from this and the family's takeaway from this and outside experts' takeaway from this, is that something happened and that there needs to be more due diligence from the state or from somebody to investigate how this inmate died. As I said, there are theories. All of them have a common denominator in that this inmate, Albert Thornton, didn't die a natural death.
Let's go to Wayne, or Carl. Let's go to Carl. Hello, Carl.
Hello.
Hi, what's on your mind?
Well, I'm one of these old Vietnam veterans. I'm probably tougher than 6 people. But, the thing about it is, and no prisoner or inmate should ever be abused. But the thing about it is, the people up there have to defend themselves.
People up there have to defend themselves?
Yes, but without abusing people.
Right.
But then another thing about it is, because our officers in this country, in the prisons, and everywhere else, they have to defend themselves, but they don't have to use abuse.
So what do you think about this situation?
Well, if they abused the guy or killed him, he was mistreated, then whoever did it should pay.
Okay. All right.
Is that fair enough?
That's fair enough. Carl, thank you for that. Okay, we have to take a break. If you want to call, there's a number, 615-737-PLUS, 615-737-7587. We will get to the calls right after this break. Be back right after this.